Welcome to Coffee and Conversation. My name is Honorine, and today I'm with Benjamen Goff, who is pursuing a PhD in history. Benjamen, welcome, and thank you for being with me today.
Hi, Honorine. Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Let's start with a little introduction from you.
Like you said, my name is Ben Goff. I'm pursuing a PhD in history. My area of expertise is early modern France, and more specifically, my dissertation focuses on military medicine in the long 18th century. I did my undergraduate work at Penn State, and then I got a master's in history at Duquesne University, which is a small school in Pittsburgh. And then I came to FSU because of an institute that is in the history department here at FSU. So it's called the Institute on Napoleon and the French Revolution. And within the United States, it's one of the better places to study French history for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is that we have great faculty. So we have a high concentration of people who study France in the FSU history department. Two of those faculty members hold endowed chairs. So they're excellent researchers and excellent instructors. So if you want to pursue a PhD in French history, Florida State's a great option. And the second reason why the Institute is a great option is there's lots of funding. So as I'm sure we'll talk about later, there are many opportunities to go to France. So I've been the lucky beneficiary of excellent funding and opportunities to do primary research in French archives. Outside of my schoolwork, I feel like I'm a pretty typical nerd. Everyone in the humanities is, right? Really into board games, really into video games, into all sorts of things in the fantasy genre. So I love fantasy movies. I love fantasy podcasts. I love fantasy board games. Just a general nerd all around, but that's not uncommon for for people in the humanities.
I will second you on the nerd aspect of people in humanities.
Yeah.
So you said your expertise is in early modern France, especially the military medicine in the 18th century. How did you get into that topic?
I chose French history from an early date, pretty much by coincidence, because in high school in Pennsylvania, you have to learn a language. And my high school had kind of limited language options. We had German, French, and Spanish. And so when I was choosing a language, I just, picked out randomly between those three and wound up on French. So I had French skills going into the PhD. And then I really enjoy the early modern period because it's far enough back in the past that things are weird. It's totally different from the modern conceptions about how we think government should work or how we think religion should work. It's a foreign land. But at the same time, you see that they call it the early modern period for a reason. You see small roots of modernity. Like, for example, you start to see state formation. So governments are becoming more centralized. They're starting to do some of the things that we think of that government should do. And so it's a nice mix of the old and the new that really draws me into the early modern period. And then I've always been sort of a military history buff, for better or for worse. And so I thought, okay, well, these three interests combined are going to lead me to early modern French military history. And then I chose military medicine because I was looking towards the job market. I was trying to think of ways that I could sell myself as an academic. So if I'm doing a topic on military medicine, I can sell myself as a military historian or a medical historian. And then by doing an early modern project that is mostly early modern, but also continues into the 19th century, I can sell myself as an early modernist, or I can sell myself as a modernist. So I have all of these little connections to different aspects of history, and I can pitch myself that way and hopefully apply for a greater range of jobs. So that was the rationale. It was kind of, it was a pragmatic move. But as I got into the dissertation, I really do like military medical history. There's lots of interesting nooks and crannies to explore. So I'm happy with the choice.
Stage are you in your dissertation?
Pretty advanced. I'm hoping to defend in the spring. So I have 6 chapters planned and I have 4 chapters written. So 2 more chapters to go.
And what was your experience with writing the dissertation? Especially you went through, I think you're in your 5th year, right?
I think I'm past that. I think I'm in the program. I think I'm in my 7th year.
7th year. Okay. Yeah. So you were big into the COVID
Yeah.
time. So yeah, what was your experience with writing your dissertation? And have you been staying at home, writing in your home, in your office at home, or have you been going to the library, to the cafes? How do you write? How do you find the motivation to write the dissertation at the end?
Finding the motivation is tough. I would say 90% of my writing is done here in my home office. My process for writing is that I write an outline and then immediately ignore it. Every chapter I've started with an outline, and I thought, okay, this outline looks good, and then I actually start writing, and I find a million holes in the outline, and then instead of like, what I should do is go back and adjust the outline, but instead I keep writing and then keep changing my outline. So by the time I'm finished with the chapter, I have like a Frankenstein outline with like that nobody in the whole world could make any sense of. Like, just it would totally incoherent. And then my chapter, the first drafts are very rough. They're not going to say like, oh, my chapters are amazing. But the chapters make more sense. It's sort of I think of it as like a process of like constant refinement. So like I get the chapter, and that chapter is like a big hunk of clay that I'm trying to sculpt something out of. And then, I get my outline is just like the very broadest shape of the sculpture at its like, most vague. And then as I'm actually doing the writing, you start to see the form of the chapter or the form of the sculpture coming into shape. But in doing that process, my original outline is sort of lost as I continue to refine, as I continue to shape that ball of clay how I want. So even though I have a direction at the beginning of the process of writing, I often find that like I'm going to take a whole bunch of detours before I finish the chapter.
You've been to France a couple times for research. Would you say that those trips helped you in writing your dissertation in terms of motivation? Because as you said, and I think everybody can, agree with you, finding the motivation is hard. So how those trips have helped you, or maybe not, because you find new stuff and you're like, oh my God, it should be a new chapter, but I don't have the time or the space.
My first big research trip. So I had 3 trips to France. My first trip was like an exploratory trip, very short, just 2 weeks. I didn't really get much done in those 2 weeks. That was the best thing that happened in those 2 weeks, was I figured out how to navigate a French archive. I didn't find any documents that ended up being helpful. It was just purely, like familiarizing myself with the process. The second trip was a very long trip. It turned out to be very, very helpful. I got 75% of my documents that I needed on that trip. But the problem was the entirety of the dissertation had not yet formed in my mind. So a lot of times it was demotivating to be over in France, because I felt like I was swimming in a sea of infinite documents. Like, I would go into the archive, I would take out a box that, on the surface was related to my dissertation. But since my question wasn't formed enough yet, it felt like I was just looking at a random collection of papers, and I couldn't pull a story out of it. And so that was demotivating, because I was thinking to myself, how am I ever going to turn this pile of random puzzle pieces into a finished picture? Like, this is an impossible task. It took me, to get motivated, I had to come back and slowly digest everything I found, which was a long a long process, because when you're doing research, and especially when you maybe don't have a laser focused research question, the end result is you take a million pictures of, so many documents, and then you have tens of thousands of pages to read, and you think, how am I going to do that? So it was a long process to digest those pages and come up with a specific research question. But then on my third trip, I found it extremely motivating because the question was more focused. I was finding I could differentiate between which documents would help and which documents wouldn't help. I knew exactly where to find them, whereas in the previous trip, I had a vague idea of where to find them and a vague idea of what I was looking for. So some days would be super productive and some days I'd find nothing. But on my latest trip, once I had a more defined question, every day was turning up nuggets of gold. Like, I would go into the archive and I'd be like, here's the box I need to go see. And then, 85% of the time that box was exactly what I was looking for. So the last trip was very motivating. Previous trips, not so much.
It's part of the process.
Yeah.
Maybe you were also more prepared for this last trip because you knew what to expect. So the pre-departure preparation was maybe more effective.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. 100% that was the case.
On your grad impact profile, you said, I quote, "The past can be a weapon." What did you mean by that?
Historians ideally should be used to blunt that weapon, or be a corrective to that weapon, or show how people who are politically motivated to distort history, how they are in many cases wrong.
Earlier, you talked about, how difficult the job market is, and how when you picked your topic, you were already thinking about the job market. How do you see yourself in 5 years from today?
I'm going to choose to err on the side of optimism. I'm going to say I see myself, in a tenure track position. Hopefully, so when you get a degree from Florida State, it's not going to be at the same level of the institution where you got your degree at. So I probably won't be at an R1 school like Florida State or Florida or Miami or, any of the big schools. But, I would love to be at a small liberal arts college, like a small four-year state school, a small four-year private institution. I've actively been planning for that. So in a smaller history department, you need to be able to teach a wider variety of courses. So I've gotten a lot of experience teaching courses outside of my comfort zone here at Florida State. So I've done a world history course, which is, a very desirable trait for any history department, because that's always a course that's going to be offered. I've done a history of the Middle East, which shows that, I'm not just European centric. I can focus on other parts of the globe. I've done a history of medicine that wasn't European or French medicine. It was American history, the history of American medicine. And then this semester, I'm also prepping a course called Engage 100, which is an interdisciplinary study course aimed at showing undergraduate history majors how they can make the most of their degree. So how to maximize their time at FSU, how to position themselves for a good job after graduation. So by the time I hit the job market, I will have all of these courses already under my belt, and I can go to a small department and say, hey, I can be the jack of all trades. I can teach European history, I can teach Middle Eastern history, I can teach world history, I can even do some interdisciplinary studies where I'm talking about like the process of being an undergraduate student. So I feel like not only am I doing that with my dissertation, I'm doing that also with the courses I've prepped, aiming at teaching at a small school that has a small staff or a small faculty of history instructors.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And it was great to know more about your project, your research, and the program at FSU.
Yeah, thanks, Honorine. It was great to talk to you.